Hey guys! Tonight, we follow the iron footsteps of emperors, men with flame-red beards, Sicilian palaces, and a dangerous fondness for crowns forged in fire. You wake up in a smoky chapel. Frankincense curls past flickering torches. Robes rustle, and there he stands taller than most, chin like a battering ram, red beard gleaming with oil and pride. Frederick I, better known as Barbarossa, has just been crowned King of Germany. But don't let the incense fool you, this won't be a holy affair. The Hohenstaufen legacy is a chessboard built on bribes, Sieges, betrayals, and the occasional diplomatic marriage so cold, it might as well be a tax form. You, poor soul, are right in the middle of it. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time so we can see who else is listening in the shadows tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You kneel in Aachen Cathedral, where the air is thick with power and candle smoke. The marble beneath your knees is polished smooth by centuries of anxious nobles. Behind you, a choir begins to sing slow, deliberate. Latin. In front of you stands a man not born to be emperor, but who has been chosen to wear the weight anyway. Frederick is crowned in March of 1152. His uncle, Conrad III, has died unexpectedly, leaving no legitimate male heir. The nobles of the realm bypass Conrad's young son and elect Frederick partly for his bloodline, partly for his brawn, and mostly because they think he can restore order without burning the empire to the ground, which is optimistic. Germany, at this point, is less a kingdom than a collection of independent warlords with trust issues. The Holy Roman Empire sounds nice on parchment, but it functions like a medieval group chat. Everyone talks. No one agrees. And someone always rage quits by raising an army. Frederick's red beard already has a reputation. He's tall, strong, and said to have eyes that look like they've already calculated your betrayal. He's not loud, but he listens, watches, and then he acts fast. The nobles in Aachen think they've chosen a mediator. What they've actually chosen is a monarch with a Roman-sized ambition and a memory like a ledger. He hasn't even finished his coronation before. Whisper campaigns begin. Whispers that he wants to restore imperial authority not just in name, but in every stone, charter, and tax. The truth is, Barbarossa doesn't want chaos. He wants structure. But in medieval Europe, structure usually means someone else has to get flattened. As the crown touches his head, the choir reaches a crescendo. Somewhere outside, snow melts from the cathedral roof, dropping in thick slush onto a passing peasant. The omens are ambiguous. As usual, and there you are, at the edge of history. You aren't the emperor. You aren't the bishop. Maybe you're a scribe. Maybe you're just a wide-eyed boy who ran errands for a monk and slipped into the service unnoticed. But you will remember this moment forever. Because whether anyone realizes it or not, the empire has just changed. Barbarossa leaves Aachen with one goal in mind: to make the empire Roman again, not just in name, but in dignity, in law, in power. And to do that, he'll have to cross mountains, defy popes, outlast plagues, survive battle, and eventually drown in a river while trying to conquer the Holy Land. But don't worry, we'll get to that. For now, your journey begins in a cold chapel and an empire on the brink. Welcome to the age of iron and parchment. You ride south, through forests thick with pine and superstition. Behind you lies Aachen, but ahead Swabia. This is where you came from, home of the Hohenstaufen name, home of castles that look like knuckles, and nobles who smile like knives. If Aachen gave you a crown, Swabia forged the steel under it. The Hohenstaufen lands stretch across rugged terrain. Villages huddle beneath looming hills. Farmers till stubborn soil. And barons build towers just high enough to spot their neighbor's livestock and invent a reason to claim it. You, traveling with the imperial retinue, hear stories around every campfire of wolves that howl only when nobles die, of springs that reveal traitors, of a red-haired boy who once watched his uncle take an arrow to the knee and never flinched. Frederick grew up in this. His father, Duke Frederick II of Swabia, raised him with swordplay and suspicion. His mother, Judith of Bavaria, gave him royal blood through the Salian line, one of those political marriages that taste like power and regret. Swabia taught Frederick that order must be taken, not granted. These are not lands where laws are obeyed because they exist. They are obeyed because they are enforced, and preferably written in Latin and backed by a dozen armed knights. The imperial court returns here not just for symbolism, but for strength. Swabia is your power base, your loyalist, your home turf, and you will need every loyal heart you can find. Because while Germany bows on the surface, you know the truth. The princes are watching, waiting, testing you. Your first acts as king are carefully chosen. You confirm noble privileges, yes, even the ones you hate. You make a great show of piety, donate to monasteries, and send gifts to the Pope. You know, he's watching too. And then you summon the nobles. It's not yet an imperial diet, but it feels like one. You sit in a cold hall, tapestry swaying, firelight dancing over the edges of your beard. One by one, they enter. Some bend the knee, some merely incline their heads, but all of them measure you. And you do the same. Historians later say this was one of Barbarossa's greatest gifts, not just commanding power, but reading it, seeing how it moved in a room, knowing when a smile meant alliance or ambush. One lesser-known detail, Frederick reportedly had a habit of twirling a ring on his finger while thinking. It made the bishops nervous. They thought it was a pagan sign. He let them think it. You begin quietly reshaping the realm. You reinstate royal rights in territories where they've eroded. You confirm bishops in exchange for their loyalty. You send messengers with imperial seals and legal documents so thick they require oxen to carry them. You remind people what empire means. And it means you. Swabia watches. And Swabia approves. But even here, under your own sky, there are cracks. Your cousin, Henry the Lion, is powerful. Too powerful. He controls Saxony and Bavaria. And worse, he smiles like someone who's already writing your obituary. You smile back. Of course. For now, Frederick's Swabian roots shape everything he becomes. His respect for Roman law, his obsession with imperial symbolism, his tendency to crush cities that talk back. All of it begins here. In the hills and shadows of the south, historians argue whether his upbringing gave him vision or vanity. One theory says he believed himself to be a second Charlemagne because his mother whispered it to him during thunderstorms. Whatever the truth, you know this. He is not content to be king of a fractious land. He wants something larger, something eternal, and that means going south, across the Alps, to Italy, Germany, land of rivers, ravens, and regional disputes. You ride across it, hooves splashing through mud, scribes shivering under wool cloaks, and knights grumbling about tolls. The empire may be holy and Roman, but it's also stubborn, fragmented, and full of men with too many titles and not enough patience. Welcome to the imperial diet. No, not the kind where you count calories, the kind where you count how many bishops showed up drunk and how many dukes brought crossbows. Frederick knows he can't govern by force alone. He needs the lords, needs their banners, their coin, their grudging respect. So he calls them to a council in Frankfurt first, then others to follow. Massive gatherings with roasted boar, endless debates, and the occasional stabbing behind a tapestry. The Diet of 1152 is a test. Can he get the princes to agree on anything? Some come to pledge loyalty, others to complain about border disputes, feudal rights, or that one baron who stole someone's cousin's cow 3 years ago and still hasn't apologized. You, lowly observer, sit with the scribes. You watch the emperor lean forward, eyes narrow. You listen to him speak in a voice, calm but cold. He doesn't shout. He doesn't beg. He simply reminds them of their oaths, and then he starts redistributing power. He confirms fiefs, but only if they're balanced by favors. Elevates loyal families. He threatens to revoke lands gently. At first, he plays the princes against one another just enough to stay above them. One detail you catch, he always knows everyone's mother's name. Creepy, maybe. Effective, absolutely. This isn't rule by decree. It's rule by tension. Like pulling a bowstring. Tight, but not yet snapping. It's working. Mostly, but some in the Diet whisper about Italy. About how the emperor dreams not of Germany, but of Rome. Frederick smiles at that. Because they're right. The Alps rise before you, like the bones of ancient gods. Jagged, snow-choked, and humming with wind. They form the sacred and dangerous threshold between your German heartland and the glittering, fractious puzzle of northern Italy. You ride at the head of the imperial retinue. Knights, cooks, translators, map makers. A few unfortunate musicians trying to keep morale up, all part of the long, groaning snake of humanity slithering toward the south. Somewhere behind you, barrels of wine clatter against mules. Somewhere ahead, Italy waits with a glass of poison and a diplomatic smile. Crossing the Alps is never just a geographical task. It's a ritual, a transformation. You are not the same man who rides into the snow as the one who descends into the Lombard plains. It's cold. The winds lash at your beard. The horses slip. One poor clerk loses his ink bottle down a ravine and writes the next 6 charters in sheep's blood, hoping no one notices. They do. But then finally, Italy. And it's nothing like home. Where Germany is grim forests and sullen nobles, Italy is a jigsaw of golden cities and smug autonomy. Milan, Genoa, Venice, Cremona, each one a fortified ego wrapped in marble and trade contracts. They make coins with their own faces. They build cathedrals taller than your towers, and they smile when they say, "We answer only to God." You, of course, are here to remind them that God has an emperor. Italy was once the jewel in the imperial crown. Now, it glitters with teeth. But you don't just want it, you need it. The Holy Roman Empire is supposed to include Italy. Without it, your title is a shadow. So, you announce your arrival. Letters are sent. Envoy dispatched. You're coming not as a warlord, but as a restorer of imperial dignity. You remind them that Charlemagne was crowned in Rome, that Otto the Great ruled here, that your bloodline gives you rights no merchant guild can erase. They respond with carefully worded letters. Some offer token, obedience. Others stall, debate, delay. Milan pretends it never got your message. Genoa replies in Latin. So convoluted your best cleric faints trying to translate it. And so you begin to do what emperors do best. You escalate. You arrive with troops and rituals. You hold a court in Roncaglia and summon the cities to reaffirm their loyalty. Some come. Most arrive late. Milan sends a minor functionary who smells like fish and uses the word perhaps 13 times in one sentence. But even as they resist, they watch. Because you are not a German duke stomping through their fields. You are something rarer. Someone who believes in empire like a monk believes in salvation. Your entry into Italy is marked not by blood, but by theater. You process through cities in crimson robes, golden circlets, with bishops intoning prayers at every stop. You pause before ancient Roman statues, as if communing with the marble dead. You want the cities to remember Rome had emperors once, and now it has one again. Historians still argue whether this was genuine devotion or political cosplay. One fringe theory claims you carried a vial of soil from Charlemagne's tomb and sprinkled it at every town gate. Whatever the truth, your arrival shakes the Italian status quo. They're used to popes, dukes, squabbling consuls. They're not used to someone trying to reimpose order. You, meanwhile, are falling in love. Not with a person, but with the land, with the hills of Tuscany, the markets of Lombardy, the libraries of Ravenna. Italy seduces you not with submission, but with challenge, and you're too proud to walk away. And so begins your lifelong obsession with the South. But before you can seize a crown in Rome, you'll need to deal with a certain city full of arrogant merchants and well-armed citizens. Milan, of course. It's Milan. Milan? Glorious. Infuriating. Milanese. The city rises from the plains like a fortress draped in velvet. Its towers are proud. Its walls, thick. Its citizens, thicker. Not in the unkind sense. They're clever, bold, fiercely independent, but in that very special Italian way of being right, even when they're not. You've asked Milan to submit to imperial authority. They've responded by printing pamphlets. Yes, printing. On wooden blocks. Satirical poetry, mocking your beard. distributed by barefoot children in church squares. One even depicts you as a giant sausage strangling a dove. Bold. So, you lay Sieger. The first time, you surround the city with disciplined troops and bold declarations. The Milanese respond by dumping chamber pots from the ramparts and holding mock tournaments in your honor. Fine. You tighten the blockade. Starve them a little. Cut off trade. Then, you breach the walls. And Milan surrenders. Sort of. They hold their noses, send hostages, and promise tribute. You accept? Cautiously. And then, a year later, they rebel again. Repeat Sieger. This becomes a pattern. Milan is not just a city. It's a statement, a slap in the imperial face. Every time they resist, other cities grow braver. Every time you crush them, the Pope raises an eyebrow. But you cannot back down. You return a third time, this time with no intention of letting them up again. You burn suburbs, tear down gates, dismantle towers. You even make the leading citizens plow fields outside the ruins barefoot. With oxen. It's not just punishment, it's theater. And it works. For a while, historians remember the destruction of Milan as one of your most controversial acts. Was it necessary? Was it excessive? One peculiar detail, your troops supposedly unearthed a shrine dedicated to a local cheese deity. You had it sealed in mockery. The dairy cultists were displeased. Still, Milan's ashes. Send a message. Obey the emperor or become a footnote. And so, the cities fall in line. For now, you sit in a tent that smells like rain-damp parchment and worn-out bishops. Somewhere behind you, a donkey brays in Latin. Or maybe that's just the papal emissary complaining again. Either way, it's official. You're fighting with the Pope. Not the first time, not the last. Your opponent now is Pope Adrian IV. Real name, Nicholas Breakspear. Yes. As English. Yes. The only English Pope ever. And yes, he's already sick of you. The issue, a word. Literally. When your chancellor wrote a letter announcing your imperial authority, he used the term beneficium to describe your relationship with the Pope. Adrian is furious. He reads it as fief, as in, the Pope is your feudal overlord. You claim it was a misunderstanding, a linguistic mix-up, a clerical error. Adrian doesn't buy it. Thus begins one of the pettiest theological slap fights in medieval history. Of course, it's not just about the word. It's about power. About whether the emperor rules with papal blessing, or whether the Pope rules by divine monopoly and you're just the military contractor. Adrian threatens to excommunicate. You threaten to stop sending gifts? He threatens to back rival kings. You subtly remind him that imperial armies occasionally accidentally sack cities. The tension explodes when Adrian dies suddenly in 1159. Now, two rival popes are elected, Alexander III and Victor IV. You, being predictable. Back the one who likes you, Victor. Alexander flees to France and begins the long, dramatic process of excommunicating you and everyone you've ever shared a drink with. You try diplomacy. Sort of. You summon bishops. You issue decree. You host synods that declare Alexander illegitimate. Alexander responds by rallying Europe against you. It's like watching two gods play chess. Only the pieces are cities. Kings. and confused villagers trying to figure out which pope won. Historians call this the beginning of your great crisis. One fringe theory, that Adrian's death wasn't natural at all, but a slow-acting ink poisoning. Yes, ink? Pope conspiracies are never boring. The balance of power tips and tilts. You still control Germany? Your armies still march. But the church has declared you a danger. And that means your crown now glows with both gold and fire. You sit beneath a striped pavilion on the fields of Roncaglia, sipping wine that tastes like melted parchment and tension. The year is 1158. The grass is green. The River Po murmurs nearby, and you are about to launch one of the most ambitious power grabs since Julius Caesar asked, "Hey, who's up for crossing a Rubicon?" Roncaglia isn't just a meeting, it's an imperial mic drop. You've summoned legal scholars from the University of Bologna, a place so obsessed with Roman law that its professors dream in Latin footnotes. These men arrive not with swords, but scrolls. And that's even more dangerous. They've studied the Corpus Juris Civilis of Justinian like it's a sacred text. And they are here to justify your supremacy with ink and precedent. You call an imperial diet a fancy way of saying, let's get the gang together and argue for 10 days straight. Nobles, bishops, city reps, military leaders, and an occasional confused juggler all gather under tents that flap ominously in the wind. You open with a declaration, the rights of the emperor are derived directly from ancient Roman law. That's right. You're not just a ruler. You are the legal heir of Augustus. That makes you more than just holy. More than just Roman. You're practically eternal. Gasps. Murmurs. Someone drops a goblet. You press on. The cities of Lombardy. You explain? Have no right to issue laws. Collect taxes. Or elect magistrates without your say-so. They are subjects, not sovereigns. They owe you allegiance, military support, and most importantly, money. You don't even blink when Milan's envoy turns a shade of purple so deep it could be bottled and sold as angry grape. The Roncaglia decrees are passed. Your legal scholar. Bless their dry little hearts. Outline everything. Tolls, markets, military levies, judicial appeals. All must pass through imperial hands. You've turned Roman law into medieval handcuffs, and they click shut with frightening efficiency. Historians agree this was a turning point. One called it the Great Imperial Fiction. Another, a bureaucratic blitzkrieg. Even modern legal systems owe a few dusty corners to the rulings you passed here. Fringe theorists. They believe you held secret night meetings with your jurists, asking them to translate not just laws, but omens, because the stars, after all, still matter when the Pope hates you. And yes, he still hates you. Of course. You don't implement the Roncaglia decrees all at once. You're too clever for that. You start with cities that already owe you favors, then the vulnerable ones, then Milan again. Because someone has to suffer, but the damage is done. The cities know what's coming. They begin whispering to each other, not in open defiance, but in shared dread. They form alliances. Secret ones. Then not so secret ones. You hear murmurs of a league. A coalition of cities bound not by loyalty to you, but to one another. Still, for now, your authority looks real. You ride through Lombardy like a second Caesar. You hold court beneath faded Roman arches. and pretend not to notice the pigeons. But the pigeons aren't the problem. It's the cities. They're sharpening their knives. You ride out at dawn. The Lombard League rides at noon. It's 1176. And after years of legal proclamations, failed diplomacy, and deeply passive-aggressive correspondence with Milan, you're done playing nice? You've assembled one of the largest imperial armies ever seen north of Rome. Knights in iron, crossbowmen with gear creaking in the morning frost, banner after banner, flapping like angry wings. This time, you plan to finish it. The Lombard League has gathered too. Milan, Brescia, Piacenza. Verona cities that once sneered at each other over trade rights now hold hands like terrified children in a thunderstorm. They've pooled soldiers, money, and most symbolically, a carrocchio. Ah, yes, the carrocchio, a wheeled altar shrine to civic liberty, draped in flags, carried by oxen, guarded like the Ark of the Covenant. You see it on the horizon, red and white, lumbering like a holy refrigerator. And you know this is more than a battlefield. It's a statement. Legnano. It sounds quaint. A sleepy Lombard village you could probably conquer with a trumpet and a frown. But today, it becomes a crucible. Your cavalry charges in formation. Trumpets scream. Steel flashes. And for a moment, it works. You're winning. Milanese lines bend. Your knights punch through. And then, it unravels. The League's infantry doesn't break. Their formation holds. From behind hedgerows and ditches, paysans soldiers pour route, stabbing at your flanks. The carrocchio doesn't fall. It becomes a rallying cry. Citizens, clergy, butchers, sons of barbers all screaming libertà and refusing to die properly. Your standard falls. Your horse bolts. You vanish. Some say killed. Others say trampled. For days. The world believes the emperor is dead. You aren't. You emerge from hiding, battered and humiliated. But something is dead. The illusion of imperial invincibility. Historians love this moment. It's cinematic. One version has you hiding in a swamp for 2 days, eating cold eel and reflecting on your life choices. Another swears you disguised yourself as a monk and muttered Latin until you were rescued. And the Lombard League. They don't invade. They don't seize your lands. They don't burn your cathedrals. They just win. The Battle of Legnano becomes legend etched into civic pride, painted on town hall walls, cited in every future rebellion against emperors, kings, or anyone who tries to raise taxes. You retreat, you regroup, but something's changed. You're still Barbarossa, still red-bearded and iron-willed, but now you're mortal. You return not with an army, but a bride, Beatrix of Burgundy, daughter of prestige, heiress of lands, and sharper than any sword in your scabbard. You meet her at a carefully staged court. Wearing your least blood-stained tunic, she wears a gown stitched with tiny golden falcons and eyes that could melt a cathedral's treasury. The marriage is political. Of course it is. She brings with her the free county of Burgundy, a mountainous buffet zone rich in silver, wine, and nobles who love arguing more than breathing. You bring an empire and a famously dangerous beard. But the alliance works. You make her empress. She makes you laugh. She also corrects your grammar in 5 languages. Negotiates with Lombard cities behind your back. And once allegedly sent a coded letter to the Byzantine court just to see if they'd respond. Together, you stage imperial pageants that haven't been seen since Charlemagne. Full regalia. Crimson silks. Eagles stitched into everything from robes to underpants. Beatrix insists on protocol. You let her. You admire her precision. She can turn a wedding banquet into a diplomatic coup with 2 winks and a toast. One historian called her the hidden iron behind the red beard. Another described her as the empress who made German look fashionable in Milan. With Burgundy secured, you shift focus back to Italy. Always Italy. But Beatrix keeps your western flank stable. She visits monasteries. Funt scholas. Hires spies. Yes. She absolutely has spies. One once posed as a pastry chef and discovered a plot to poison your wine. Beatrix also gives you children, lots of them. Some live. Someday, one will become the next emperor. But all of them know who runs the family. Historians often forget her. They shouldn't. She was your peace treaty. Your mirror. Your softest weapon. And when you rode into battle again, she stayed behind not because she feared for your life, but because she was already planning what came after it. You pack your armor? Again, it's 1189. And the call to crusade echoes across Christendom like a trumpet with a guilt complex. Jerusalem has fallen again. Pope Gregory VIII declares that only a full-scale holy war can reclaim the Holy Sepulchre. You fought Italians, popes, princes, and plagues. But now, it's time to fight your greatest foe, yet sand. The Third Crusade assembles its cast: Richard the Lionheart Handsome, deadly, allergic to peace treaties. Philip Augustus, of France, moody, calculating, already writing memoirs. And then there's you, Frederick Barbarossa, 70 years old, and somehow still terrifying. You set out overland with an army of tens of thousands. The journey is brutal. Rivers flood. Food spoils. Bandits lurk. Your baggage train looks like a traveling court and smells like wet goat. But the men follow you. You're the red-bearded Titan, the Emperor of the West, the man who humiliated Milan and kept popes sweating in their sleep. In Hungary, you're welcomed. In Byzantium, tolerated. In Anatolia, not so much. There, the terrain turns jagged. The heat slaps like judgment. And one afternoon near the Salif River, as your men break for camp, you decide against all reasonable advice to take a swim. You remove your armor, step into the current, and vanish beneath the water. Panic erupts. Your attendants dive after you. Your generals scream. Moments later, your lifeless body is pulled from the riverbed, your beard tangled with reeds. Some say a heart attack. Others say cramp. Some whisper divine punishment. Historians still debate the cause. One outlandish theory that you was dragged under by a demon eel, worshipped by local heretics. Probably not. But it's the Middle Ages. Stranger things have happened. Your army freezes. Crusaders weep. Some boil your body, hoping to preserve your bones for burial in Jerusalem. Others flee. The crusade staggers on without its anchor. You drown not on the battlefield, but in an obscure river whose name no one remembers unless they study obscure footnotes. You're dead, but not forgotten. In fact, you become more important after you die. Not because your policies were perfect or your legacy unshakable, but because your story refuses to stay buried. First, there's the logistical problem. What to do with your soggy, emperor-sized corpse? Your followers debate options with the urgency of a man trying to fold a soaked tent. Burial in Jerusalem was the dream, but Jerusalem is far, too far. So they settle for a gruesome medieval compromise. Boil the flesh from your bones. Yes? You're turned into emperor soup. Your skeleton is packed into one casket. Your flesh in another. Some say your heart was kept separately, stored in a golden box beneath a portable altar. Practical. Arguably. Dignified. Not remotely. Word of your death spreads faster than any horse can gallop. In Rome, the papacy exhales. In Germany, shock grips the court. And in the German forests, peasants light candles and begin the whispers. He's not dead. He's only sleeping. And thus begins the Kyffhäuser legend, one of medieval Europe's most durable myths, deep beneath the Kyffhäuser mountains. They say, lies Barbarossa on a stone throne. His beard has grown through the table. Ravens circle the peaks above. One day, when the empire is in peril, he will rise again. It sounds absurd, except that people keep believing it. Through plague, war, and reformation, the story endures. Poets write ballads. Children memorize rhymes. Nationalists in the 19th century raise monuments. The sleeping emperor becomes a symbol not just of Frederick, but of the longing for unity, strength, and someone who knew what he was doing. Historians debate whether the legend began immediately or decades later. A fringe theory claims a Hohenstaufen loyalist deliberately invented it to keep rebels in line. Obey. Now, he could return any day. It works, in ways no one expects. Because even dead, you're not done shaping the empire. The crown shifts uneasily. After your death in 1190, the empire becomes a stage with too many actors and no script. Your son, Henry VI, is poised to inherit. He's young, sharp, ambitious, and dangerously efficient. Unlike your grand imperial theater, Henry prefers swift signatures, silent threats, and results where you charmed cities and sparred with popes. Henry simply shows up with soldiers. But even as he dons the crown of Germany, he's thinking farther south. You see, Henry married Constance of Sicily. Yes. That Sicily, the rich, sun-drenched, knife-filled island at the toe of Italy that's ruled by a dynasty of Normans. When the last Norman king dies childless in 1194, Constance presses her claim, and Henry seizes the opportunity like a banker spotting an unpaid debt. He marches to Sicily with a cold smile and a massive army. The cities resist. Briefly, he crushes them. The barons grumble. He jails them. A royal cousin rebels. He has him boiled alive. Literally. Sicilian politics are not for the squeamish. Henry is crowned King of Sicily. making him the first ruler in generations to unite Germany and southern Italy under one scepter. In theory, it's magnificent. North and south. Alps to sea. A truly Roman Empire reborn. In practice, it's a logistical nightmare. The cultures clash. The bureaucracies snarl. The Pope panics. Historians still argue whether Henry genuinely believed he could rule at all or simply wanted to try before dying. One fringe story claims he kept a personal notebook titled "How to Replace the Pope with a Trained Owl." No one's found it. Yet. But Henry doesn't get long to dream. In 1197, on campaign in southern Italy, he falls violently ill fever. Sweats. Visions. Some whisper poison. Others say it was malaria. Either way, he dies at 31. The empire mourns but also gulps, because he leaves behind an heir. A child. Just 3 years old. You are 3 years old. Your name is Frederick. You toddle through stone halls in Palermo while men in armor argue about whether you're old enough to rule the largest empire in Europe. One man says, "You're a gift from God." Another says you're a Sicilian puppet. A third just wants your tiny fingers off his wine goblet. Your father, Henry VI, is dead. Your mother, Constance of Sicily, is suddenly the last person holding the empire together. She acts fast, smarter than most. Give her credit for. She declares herself regent. Moves fast to claim Sicily in your name. And negotiates something no one expects. She places you, her only son, under the protection of the Pope. Yes, the Pope. The same papacy your grandfather warred with. The same Rome that once prayed for your dynasty's collapse. No. In a twist fit for a Greek tragedy written by a German tax clerk, Innocent III, the newly elected and razor-sharp Pope, becomes your guardian. Historians blink at this. Was it political genius? Desperation both? One theory says Constance made a secret vow to enter a convent if Frederick lived past 5. Another claims she simply knew that putting you under papal care would make you untouchable for a while. Constance dies in 1198. You're now an orphan. A prince with an empire in the north and a kingdom in the south, but no way to reach either without help. And the vultures start circling. Back in Germany, 2 rival kings are crowned Philip of Swabia, your uncle, and Otto of Brunswick, a Welf cousin with a habit of smiling like a man who's already ordered your arrest. The empire fractures again. You, meanwhile, grow up in Palermo, but not like a traditional German heir. Your household is multicultural. Your tutors speak Arabic, Greek, Latin, Hebrew. Your nurses hum Saracen lullabies. The palace smells of saffron, ink, and horse sweat. You learn quickly. You watch everything. And you never forget who abandoned you. You're not just surviving, you're transforming. The Palermo court becomes your cocoon. And within it, you begin your metamorphosis not into a German emperor, but something stranger, something broader, a ruler of boundaries, not nations, of ideas, not just land. You are Frederick II. And from a very young age, you show signs that the old mold doesn't fit. While German princes are squabbling over who gets to tax which valley, you are reading treatises on optics in Arabic. While French lords argue over the divine right of kings, you're watching Saracen engineers build domes that never fall. Your mind is a sponge, and it's soaking up everything. You learn 6 languages. You ride falcons before you ride horses. You sit in long philosophical debates with Jewish physicians and Muslim mathematicians, asking them questions about the stars, the body, and whether reason can trump faith. At 10 years old, you stun a visiting cardinal by quoting Aristotle and then correcting his Latin. But outside your palace walls, ciao reins. In Germany, the rival claimants Philip of Swabia and Otto of Brunswick battle furiously. Innocent III, your papal guardian, supports Otto at first. Then Philip gets assassinated at a wedding. Yes, at the wedding, and Otto becomes emperor. For a moment, peace. Then, Otto breaks every deal he made with the Pope and tries to claim southern Italy for himself. So Innocent III drops Otto like an empty collection plate and turns to you. You, barely 15, are crowned King of the Romans in Germany with papal backing. But even as he anoints you, the Pope quietly panics. You're growing smarter, more independent. Laisse de vous. Some say he sees the future in your eyes, and it terrifies him. Historians still debate this shift. Was Innocent trying to control you, or grooming you to be a pliable heir? A fringe theory says he'd always intended to install someone else and only supported you when every other option failed. Whatever his intentions, it's too late. You are no longer a Sicilian orphan. You are a rising emperor, and the game is about to change. The crown touches your head. Again, you've already been king of Sicily. Now, in 1220, you are crowned Holy Roman Emperor in Rome, and it should feel triumphant. Instead, it feels strenge, formal, even awkward. The Pope, now Honorius III, successor to your former guardian Innocent, is cordial, but guarded. The blessing is real, but the words are sharp-edged. You kneel. You kiss the cross, but your eyes scan the crowd for bishops who will turn against you the moment the incense clears, because you remember everything. The betrayals, the bargains, the papal hesitation, the way they treated you like a pawn while you were a child. No, you're no longer the boy king they could shape. You're Frederick de Soie. And you plan to reshape them instead? You leave Rome with the imperial regalia and a long to-do list. You issue edicts from the saddle. You write letters to Muslim rulers in the East. You re-establish imperial control over rebellious cities in Lombardy. You summon jurists to revise the laws of the empire, and you personally edit the drafts. Your mind never stops. One cleric writes that you sleep only 2 hours a night. Another claims you once read 3 books simultaneously by making scholars read aloud in shifts. Back in Sicily, you begin building your legacy. You found the University of Naples the first publicly funded university in Europe. Your laws compiled in the constitutions of Melfi standardize justice, coinage, and medical practice across the kingdom. But your enemies grow louder. In Germany, nobles bristle at your southern focus. In Rome, the papacy watches your rise with increasing anxiety. Historians often describe you as a modern ruler trapped in a medieval world. Others say you were just better at pretending. But in 1220, one thing is clear. Your empire has a pulse again. And it beats to your rhythm. You promised a crusade. Back when you were still just king of the Romans, you'd sworn a holy vow to lead an army to the Holy Land. It was the usual arrangement, papal support in exchange for sacred war. A little blood, a little glory, a whole lot of logistics. Everyone expected you to delay. But you perfected the art. Your delays become legend. First, it's the rebellion in northern Italy. Then it's the plague in your fleet. Then, a diplomatic incident with Genoa. Then you lose a shipment of armor. Then your horses come down with something. It's always something. The Pope, now Gregory IX. A man who makes paranoia look like a sacrament loses patience. In 1227, when you cancel yet again, Gregory excommunicates you. Publicly, harshly, loudly. You're furious. You respond with letters. Dozens of them, meticulously drafted, circulated across Europe. You explain your illness. You detail your devotion. You accuse Gregory of meddling in imperial affairs. And then, in the ultimate mic drop, you go to the Holy Land anyway. Yes, while under excommunication. You sail to the Levant with a small, oddly scholarly army. No war elephants, no Ziga engines, just envoys, interpreters, and Arabic-speaking notaries. You arrive in Acre in 1228. The Christians there are confused. Is this legal? Is this holy? Should we clap? You don't care. You reach out to Al-Kamil, the Ayyubid Sultan of Egypt and nephew of Saladin. Instead of bloodshed, you offer diplomacy. The two of you exchange gifts, discuss astronomy, even swap jokes about Rome. You bond over mutual disgust for noisy fanatics. Then the unthinkable happens. Al-Kamil agrees to give you Jerusalem. Frederick II, Emperor of the West, walks into the Holy City without a single battle and crowns himself in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre alone. No papal blessing, no priestly chants, just you, the crown, and the echo of your enemies choking on their outrage. Historians still debate whether this was genius or heresy. One theory says the Pope screamed for 3 days straight when he heard, "But Jerusalem is yours." And you've just proven that diplomacy can succeed where crusades failed. You return, not as a crusader, but as a riddle. You've recovered Jerusalem without drawing a sword. You've done the impossible and made everyone angry in the process. The Pope still has you excommunicated. The barons are suspicious. The bishops are torn. And your enemies, they've just realized you're not playing by their rules. You head back to Sicily, the heart of your kingdom, and begin turning your court into something Europe has never seen. Not a den of warlords or a papal puppet theater, but a living laboratory of learning. Science, administration, and law. You summon Muslim engineers, Jewish physicians, Greek translators, Latin theologians, and seat them around the same table. They debate in 6 languages. You encourage them to test the limits of knowledge, not just read it. A physician recommends a remedy for fever. You demand it be tested. A cleric quotes a miracle. You ask for evidence. This is not normal behavior. Not for a medieval emperor. Not for anyone. You issue edicts requiring that doctors be licensed that bakers follow weight standards, and that public officials can read. You reorganize the Sicilian bureaucracy so thoroughly that parts of it will survive until Napoleon, and through it all, you write. Your most famous work is De Arte Venandi cum Avibus, on the art of hunting with birds, a book about falconry that is also a manifesto on observation, classification, and the beauty of systems. It includes drawings, measurements, and behavioral notes on dozens of birds. You personally edit it, correct the diagrams, add footnotes. You don't just rule the natural world, you catalog it. Your court becomes the most advanced in Europe. Some call it the wonder of the world, stupor mundi. But not everyone is impressed. Papal envoys grumble that your court reeks of heresy. Priests accuse you of favoring Muslims. A cardinal accuses you of keeping a private zoo of scholars instead of confessors. They're not entirely wrong. You believe that knowledge transcends creed. That truth can be debated. That God does not fear questions. And that, for some, is the most terrifying thing of all. You are crowned in Rome, but you rule from Palermo. The contrast is striking. Where Rome is political, ritualistic, and brittle with church bureaucracy, Palermo is lush, rhythmic, alive. You walk its courtyards beneath citrus trees, with Arabic inscriptions curling along marble walls. You hear 5 languages before breakfast. Rome, you've decided, is not your capital. Your empire isn't medieval, it's Mediterranean. But your imperial presence still stretches northward. You summon Dietz in Germany, reissue laws of the empire, and balance the ambitions of German princes with the fury of Italian cities. Your bureaucracy has 2 speeds fast, and wasn't that already handled last week? German scribes grumble about your preference for Sicilian clerks, who arrive in Frankfurt wearing silk and quoting Aristotle. You don't mind. You like the discomfort. Your empire needs to change, or it will die. In 1231, you issue the Constitutions of Melfi, a legal code so advanced it makes most monarchs look like they govern by wishful thinking and dice rolls. Justice is centralized. Nobles are bound to written law. Judges are trained. Even medical malpractice is addressed. Seriously? You find surgeons who amputate the wrong limb. You also found schools, build observatories, and sponsor astronomical translations. But you're not just a scholar, you're still a king. And when cities revolt, particularly those in Lombardy, you send armies. The Lombard League, resurrected once more, fights to maintain its liberties. They accuse you of being another Barbarossa. You remind them publicly that your grandfather never knew Arabic poetry, and then comes excommunication. Again, in 1239, Pope Gregory IX accuses you of everything from delaying crusades to heresy to possibly being the Antichrist. Seriously, you respond with a letter addressed to all kings of the earth concerning the lies of a certain bishop of Rome. It spreads across Europe. This isn't just political anymore. It's cosmic. And you've never felt more alive. You are emperor. You are excommunicated. And you are undefeated. But for how long you march north with armies made of Sicilian Saracens? Yeomen, knights, and mercenary crossbowmen who sing tavern songs about theology and siegecraft. You sweep into Lombardy, capturing rebellious cities one by one. But this isn't just conquest. It's punishment. You impose fines, dismantle walls. Deeper, troublemakers. In Cremona, you hang banners showing the Pope tied to a donkey. It's subtle. Meanwhile, you gather scholars to write counter-sermons, intellectual takedowns of papal claims, arguing that the empire is a sacred authority equal to the church. You cite scripture. You invoke Roman precedent. You quote Augustine, sometimes out of context, but no one checks. The Pope is furious. He calls for a crusade against you. Not Muslims. Not pagans. You, the Roman Emperor. The man who once gave Jerusalem back to Christendom. It's a strange war. Priests in southern France preach sermons against your falcons. Bishops claim your court breeds atheism. One theologian accuses you of conducting experiments on infants to discover the natural language of man. You did. It failed. No one spoke. You were devastated. But you keep going. Because you believe the Pope is not God's will but a man? A man who has grown too comfortable atop Peter's throne. And you plan to knock? You build a castle. Not for defense, not for show, but for geometry. Castel del Monte. In Apulia, an octagon within an octagon. 8 towers. 8 sides. No moat. No curtain wall. It's a fortress designed like a thought experiment. You walk the corridors alone sometimes, counting the steps, watching the light change. Some say it's a solar calendar. Others, a Masonic temple. You never say? What matters is, it's yours. This is your empire. Now not just ruled by swords, but shaped by ideas. You correspond with scientists in Baghdad, scholars in Spain, mathematicians in Paris. You sponsor translations of Aristotle, Galen, and even newly arrived Greek texts once lost in the East. You order that legal proceedings be recorded, that grain supplies be tracked, that taxes be regularized. You hate disorder. You loathe imprecision. If something must be punished, let it be done by code, not whim. Your officials start wearing robes that match the filing system, not gitting. You even invent new coins struck with your profile in Roman style. Because why not revive Caesar's fashion sense while you're at it? But beneath the order, cracks. Your sons bicker. One betrays you. Another dies. The Pope foments rebellion. German nobles whisper that you've gone native. Historians still argue whether you were an emperor of vision or vanity. But inside Castel del Monte, where every arch leads to light, you don't care. You're not building for them. You're building for the future. The Pope dies. Gregory IX, the tireless, wrathful thorn in your side, finally expires in 1241. Some say of rage, others of relief. Either way, there's a pause. The world breathes. You smile? A conclave is called, but it stalls. Cardinals argue. Some flee. One dies of exposure. You block the roads to Rome, just temporarily, to help them focus. It works. Eventually, Innocent IV becomes Pope. Younger, cunning, smiling. You pretend to be friends. You're not. Innocent immediately calls a general council, the Council of Lyon, and declares open war on you. He upholds your excommunication. declares your empire forfeited, urges Christian rulers to invade. You write more letters. Some say they are your best work. Legalistic, elegant, scathing. You accuse the Pope of corruption, of undermining the empire, of sowing chaos. Europe is divided. Some kings side with you, others with Rome. But more than anything, they hedge their bets. Meanwhile, you fall ill, coughing, fatigue, a mystery sickness. You keep writing, keep ruling, but your eyes no longer sparkle as before. And even in Castelmonte, the sun begins to set early. Death stalks you. You feel it in your bones. Not the grand, cinematic death you once imagined, armor-clad, sword-raised, struck down by betrayal. No, this is quieter. Your lungs rattle, your joints swell, the physicians whisper in corners. You order more wood for the fires. The halls of Palermo are suddenly too wide, too empty. You summon your surviving children. Manfred, brilliant, illegitimate, adored, Conrad. Your German heir, distant, controlled, suspicious of Manfred, suspicious of everyone. You try to settle the succession, but you know what's coming. The empire is a puzzle of fragile alliances, paper laws, exhausted armies, and a legacy too heavy for any one man to carry. And then on the 13th of December, 1250, in Castel Fiorentino, you close your eyes. A servant reads you scripture. You whisper something, no one remembers what. They say a falcon perched on your bedpost the moment you died. Maybe? It's getting repetitive at this point. You've been cast out of the church more times than you've changed royal robes. But this time, it feels different. Not because the Pope's curses have grown sharper, but because your enemies have finally caught the scent of blood. Still, you don't panic. You write. You pick up the pen like a sword and compose your reply to all the kings of the earth on the falsehoods of a certain bishop of Rome. That's what you call him now. Not the Pope. Not His Holiness. Just a certain bishop. Cold. Clinical. Cutting. Your letters don't plead. They dissect. You accuse the Pope of ambition cloaked in virtue, of corruption passed off as faith. You remind Europe that you brought peace to Jerusalem without shedding blood, while the papacy merely issued threats and collected tithes. And the letters spread. They are copied, recopied, read aloud in courts and cathedrals. Even bishops raise their eyebrows, because they're brilliant. You, the emperor, are wielding rhetoric like no monarch before you using law, scripture, and logic as your weapons. But not all battles can be fought with ink. In Italy, the Lombard League has risen again. Milan, Piacenza, Brescia, Bologna, they're all back, armed with papal blessing and older grudges. The north has turned into a swarm of defiance, fortified by city walls and generations of inherited contempt. So, you go to war. You ride at the head of your army, not just Sicilian knights, but Saracen archers from Lucera, German lancers from Swabia, and mercenaries from as far as Aragon. It's a kaleidoscope of armor and accents. United under your eagle banner, the Pope calls it unnatural. You call it modern. Your soldiers march through the Apennines with discipline unmatched in Italian campaigns. Cities fall. You retake Faenza. You besiege Parma. You use not just catapults, but psychology spreading rumors, bribing garrisons, cutting off aqueducts with such precision that it feels surgical. But this is not just a campaign. It's personnel. Every city that defies you is a reflection of the Pope's power. Every wall you breach is another stone chipped from his claim to supremacy. And yet, the deeper you press, the more stubborn the resistance becomes. The Pope calls for a crusade against you. Yes, you. A man baptized in Rome. Crowned emperor. Protector of Christendom. Now labeled an infidel. Priests take up the cross not to fight Muslims, but to fight you. The Holy Roman Emperor. It's absurd, but it works. For every ally you gain, the Pope turns another against you. Nobles who once bent the knee begin to hesitate. German princes mumble about your southern obsession. Merchants grumble about blocked trade routes. Even some of your oldest friends grow wary. Still, you press on because you know what's at stake. This isn't just your reign. It's the soul of the empire. You believe that emperors are not beneath the church, but beside it, that the sword and the cross were meant to balance each other, not bow in subservience. But the Pope, he believes differently, and he's winning hearts, not through strength, but through fear. You've become a villain in the eyes of many, a man too curious, too tolerant, too strange. They whisper of your court filled with Muslims. They speak of your experiments raising children in silence to discover natural language, watching decomposing bodies to learn anatomy. They don't understand. You never expected them to, but you hoped that reason would prevail. Instead, they light torches, and still, you ride. You are no longer building an empire. You are building a mind. In the rolling hills of Apulia, you choose a seat, a plateau overlooking Olive Grove, sun-soaked fields, and the winding road to Andria. Here, you build not a fortress, not a palace, but a monument to geometry, Castel del Monte. 8 towers, 8 sides, octagon within octagon. A castle without a moat, without a drawbridge, without even obvious military use. It's not for defense. It's for thinking. You design it as a calendar. Compass? An observatory. A puzzle. Light filters through its windows at precise angles, marking solstices, equinoxes, and some claim the very moment of your birth. You consult astrologers. You commission masons trained in both Roman and Arab techniques. No one builds like this anymore, because no one thinks like this anymore. Castel del Monte becomes your intellectual. Refuge, outside. The world screams in Latin and swords. Inside, you hold court with astronomers, sholas, doctors, even skeptics. You debate Aristotle. You demand translations from Greek to Arabic to Latin, tracing ideas like bloodlines. You test the movements of stars. You dissect the habits of birds. Your book, De Arte Venandi cum Avibus, becomes your second crown. A falconry manual. Yes, but also a scientific text, filled with first-hand observations, corrected errors from ancient texts, and your own diagrams. You don't just describe falcons, you chronicle their dreams. Your court in Palermo reflects this same spirit. Muslim engineers design aqueducts. Jewish financiers manage the mint. Greek scribes copy Homer and Euclid. You eat dates and drink dark coffee while planning laws that would terrify lesser monarchs. You license doctors. You standardize weights. You regulate baking. You're not ruling like Charlemagne or your grandfather Barbarossa. You're ruling like a philosopher with an army. But that doesn't mean you've forgotten war. You still lead campaigns. You still stamp out rebellion. You still send Saracens into Lombard cities like ink spilled across parchment. But your true empire now lies in systems, not spoils. Your enemies don't understand this. To them, you've grown soft, distracted, foreign. The Pope calls you an infidel with a library. He calls Castel del Monte a blasphemous sanctuary of false light. One bishop accuses you of alchemy, another of necromancy. One even claims you had a secret chamber to trap moonlight. You don't bother correcting them, because in truth, you did. Castel del Monte holds many chambers. One, sealed with lead, contains mirrors aligned with lunar cycles. You tested its rays on ink, metals, and once briefly on yourself. What did you hope to discover? Not immortality, just truth. But outside your octagons and manuscripts, the world is slipping. Your eldest son these, your second son, rebels. Your allies fracture, your body begins to falter, eyes growing dim, joints aching. Even Palermo feels colder. Even the southern sun starts to bite. You retreat often to Castel del Monte, not to hide, but to remember. Here, at least, the angles never lie. You bury the Pope. Well, not personally, but you outlive him. Gregory IX, your greatest antagonist. Your papal nemesis. The man who excommunicated you twice and called you the Antichrist in 3 languages dies in 1241. His heart gives out. Or perhaps he simply couldn't conjure one more curse. You receive the news in Lucera, watching trained falcons arc across the Apulian sky. A small, silent smile passes your face. You say nothing. You don't need to. Europe, briefly, exhales, but then comes the conclave, and it does not go well. The cardinals meet, and argue, and flee. Some are captured by Roman mobs. Others are locked in a room without food until they agree. One dies. 2 nearly come to blows. You ever the helpful monarchs surround the city with troops? Not to attack, merely to encourage deliberation. Eventually, after 2 years of chaos, they elect Innocent IV. You pretend to be hopeful. Innocent is educated, skilled, familiar. He's from Genoa, which means he can haggle. You write him letters. He writes back. Then, almost immediately, he flees to Lyon. Not a good sign. From Lyon, he calls a general council. He sends envoys across Christendom, summoning bishops, abbots, kings. The Council of Lyon, 1245, will become a theater, and you are the villain. There, Innocent speaks before hundreds of clerics. He accuses you of blasphemy, heresy, cruelty. And ambition? He compares you to Nero, Caligula, Lucifer. Et declares you the posed. The Pope strips you of your crown. And you laugh. Not because it's funny, but because it's absurd. No Pope has ever successfully deposed a sitting emperor, but Innocent believes in the power of perception. If enough, believe it. If enough, repeat it. The fiction becomes real. So, you write again? You compose your most brilliant rebuttals, yet legal arguments, theological commentaries, open letters addressed to the world. You attack the papacy's corruption, its simony, its wars. You quote the Gospels back at the Pope. You remind the world that when you took Jerusalem, no, one died. Historians call this war one of ideas. You call it self-defense? But even brilliant words have limits. German princes begin to drift. Northern cities hedge their loyalties. Even Sicilian nobles whisper treason into wine goblets. And your health? It declines. The headaches come first. Then the coughing. Then the fever. You write anyway. You sit in council anyway. You keep writing, even when the ink shakes, because you are still emperor. Even if the Pope says otherwise, you are alone more often now. Not physically, your court still bustles with scribes, pages, tutors, falconers, and doctors. But emotionally, philosophically, imperially alone. You sit at the head of the table, but it feels more like the edge of a cliff. Your empire is still vast. Yes, you still issue edicts, receive envoys, and draft plans for reform. But something has shifted. You begin to reflect, not in the passive, medieval sense of praying for salvation while staring at a crucifix, but in your own way. You gather together physicians and order experiments. You conduct studies not just on birds and laws, but on humans. You ask questions. No emperor has dared speak aloud. Like, what happens if a child is raised without hearing speech? You fund such experiments. It fails. The children grow silent. Not divine. Their minds unshaped. Their souls, perhaps, wounded. The results terrify even you. But you write them down anyway. You still compose. Still dictate letters to abbots and kings. But now you also write to sultans and caliphs. In your letters to Al-Malik Camille's successors in Egypt, you debate medicine, astrology, jurisprudence. One response even thanks you for correcting a Greek mistranslation of Galen. You're not a Christian emperor anymore, not in any conventional sense. You wear the cross? You defend the church in theory. But your heart beats in Arabic rhythms, Latin syllogisms, Greek logic. People whisper. They call you Messiah, heretic, Antichrist, philosopher king, the last of the Romans. They're all a little bit right. Meanwhile, your health continues to erode. You cough up black bile. Your feet swell. You begin wearing loser robes. You still ride occasionally. But your horse needs prompting. You sleep less and less. Your doctors recommend herbs. Your astrologers recommend prayer. Your own instincts say, write more. While you can. And so you do. You commission a complete imperial registry every tax, toll, and tithe in your realm. You begin planning a final set of legal revisions. You read the Quran and Psalms back to back, looking not for contradiction, but for common structure. Because even now, even as your enemies circle and your body betrays you, you believe the empire can still be perfected. If not in this life, then in memory. December 1250. The winds are harsh across Apulia. You've moved to Castelfiorentino, not by choice. It's remote, functional. Less of a palace and more of a fortress with plumbing problems, but it's where you need to be. You've summoned your court. You've written to your sons. You've dictated your will. Because you know it's close. The fever has returned. It's worse this time. Your skin burns while your fingers go numb. You wake at night, gasping for air. Sometimes you mistake your own reflection for someone else. Your physicians offer theories. Malaria, dysentery, infection, divine punishment. You dismiss them all. But you also make arrangements. You divide your inheritance, Conrad IV. Your legitimatea will take the German crown and Sicilian throne. Manfred, your beloved but illegitimate son, will act as regent. It's a fragile arrangement, but there's no better choice. You confess, quietly, not with ceremony, but with a whispered prayer to a god you've always questioned. You wear a simple robe. You remove your imperial ring, and then on the 13th of December, the sun barely above the horizon. UD, no trumpets, no martyrdom. Just a last breath in a cold room. The court panics. Some want to flee. Others begin looting. But your loyal scribes seal the doors and secure your body. There is no embalming. You are buried swiftly, quietly. In Palermo Cathedral, beneath a red porphyry slab once reserved for a Roman emperor, they say a falcon circled the roof just before the last stone was laid. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was a sign. Historians argue even about your death. Was it dysentery? Was it poisoned figs? Was it sadness? A few fringe theorists suggest you faked your death and fled east. There's no evidence. Of course, but in some ways, they're right. Because death didn't end you. You just moved. Into legend. The world you leave behind is splintered. Conrad IV takes up your mantle. He's young, competent, cautious. But the German princes are no longer yours to command. The empire groans under its own weight. And the papacy wastes no time. Innocent IV rejoices. Publicly, he calls for celebration. Privately, he sends orders isolate Conrad. Discredit Manfred. Erase Frederick. It begins slowly. You're described not as a scholar, vuta sorgere, not a reformer, but a heretic. The Vatican forbids priests from quoting your laws. Libraries hide your books. Bishops order your name scratched from dedication pages. But your memory won't die. Manfred rises to defend your legacy. He defeats a papal army at Foggia. He holds Sicily. He even tries to reunify Italy under the imperial banner. And for a while it works. But the church escalates. They invite a French prince, Charles of Anjou, to invade, fund him, bless him, arm him. And in 1266, at the Battle of Benevento, Manfred is killed. Not just defeated, hunted. His body thrown into a pit. his crown snapped in half. The empire trembles, but it does not fall. Because Conradin, your grandson, still lives, the last legitimate Hohenstaufen. At 16, he raises an army. He rides south. He wins small victories. His soldiers chant your name. But in 1268, at Tagliacozzo, he is betrayed, captured, and then, in a public square in Naples, before a stunned crowd, Conradin is executed. A boy, a king. The last Hohenstaufen, the line ends with the swing of a sword. But not your legacy, because even in defeat, your name is whispered with awe. Even in papal halls, your arguments are remembered. Even in the markets of Palermo, they tell stories about the emperor who rode with hawks, who wrote law books, who debated sultans and kissed no ring but his own. You are not gone. You are enduring. Your bones lie in Palermo, but your spirit is elsewhere, in the Kyffhäuser Mountains. They say, you sleep not in a tomb, but in a hidden chamber, beard grown long through a stone table, hands folded, eyes closed. But listening, they say ravens circle above, that the mountain hums when war is near, that you will return not for glory, but for balance, for justice. It begins as folklore, then becomes tradition. By the 14th century, ballads are sung in your name. Peasants call you the Red Emperor, the Sleeping King. Children place pebbles at your imagined cave mouth and whisper their dreams. In the 19th century, German unificationists invoke your name. You become a symbol of strength, not of conquest, but of order, of reason, of law over chaos. Even Hitler later claims you but clumsily, grotesquely, because no tyrant can truly understand a man who ruled by balance. Historians debate the origins of the myth. Some say it began the moment your body cooled. Others say the peasants needed something permanent in a world of shifting lords and collapsing borders. What's undeniable is this: you became more powerful dead than alive, because you offered something no pope, no king, no bishop could, the promise of a just emperor who did not flinch before knowledge, who did not run from questions, who ruled, not with fear, but with understanding. Your ghost is not one of war. It is one of structure, and the world has never stopped craving it. So what remains your castles? Yes, Casteldel, Monte Stillstans. Its octagonal brilliance intact. Tourists wander its chambers, guessing its meaning, tracing your shadow in every arch. Your laws partly, elements of the constitutions of Melfi, persist in southern Italian legal codes. Your reforms echo in modern administration. Some scholars still teach your decrees as early examples of secular law. Your name, it's etched into everything from operas to postage stamps. Italian anarchists call you a revolutionary. German nationalists call you a founder. Historians argue endlessly. But perhaps your greatest legacy is the question you forced Europe to ask. Can a man rule by reason in a world built on dogma? You never answered it fully, but you lived it. And in doing so, you built a model. No one can fully erase, not kings, not cardinals, not even time. The candle flickers. The story ends. The empire fades not in battle, not in fire, but in memory. You once ruled from the Alps to the sea, from the courts of Rome to the sands of Jerusalem. You wrote law books. You rode with falcons. You turned your palace into a school and your castle into a sundial. You were Stupa Mundi, the wonder of the world. And now, the world sleeps, but in the quiet hum of night, beneath the parchment stars and the soft breath of wind over Apulian grass. You still walk? Not as a king, not as a ghost, but as a question? What if reason had won sleep well? Emperor, sleep deep. You are home, in misted valleys and crooked taverns. On winter nights, when the fire burns low, the old ones still speak your name, not as a man, but as a mystery. A riddle bound in armor, a crown without a head. In Germany, they say you sleep beneath the Kyffhäuser Mountains, your beard grown long enough to weave through the stones of the table before you. Ravens circle overhead, not crows. Not vultures, but ravens, sacred in their symbolism. One for memory, one for prophecy. When they stop circling, the people say, "You awake, not to reclaim the throne, but to restore order, to judge the wicked, reward the faithful, and mend the shattered crown of the Holy Empire." You, Frederick Barbarossa, or perhaps even Frederick II for the legends, tangle them together, are not quite dead. Just waiting for the empire to deserve you. In southern Italy, they tell different stories. They say you walk the ruins of Castel del Monte, only visible at dusk, humming to yourself while running your hand along the perfect stone geometry. You speak Latin in your sleep. You watch the moonlight shift across the courtyard and whisper predictions in Arabic. Some claim you became a wandering philosopher, robed in gray, offering riddles to kings and answers to none. Others say you fled east, where the caliphs still speak your name in awe, and live in a desert palace teaching geometry to orphans. They all contradict, but the truth is this: you were never allowed to die, because you were never just a ruler. You were an idea, an emperor who ruled with both sword and scroll, who held falcons on one hand and law codes in the other, who could quote Aristotle while negotiating with Bedouin chieftains, who answered papal excommunications not with blood, but with letters written in gold ink and sealed with dignity. You defied what an emperor was supposed to be, and so you became what no emperor ever was. Immortal, not in flesh, but in expectation. In Dante's Divine Comedy, he places you in purgatory, not hell, not paradise. Just waiting, not punished, not glorified, just contemplating. Even Voltaire once sighed. If Frederick II had not existed, we would have had to invent him. And in a way, Europe did invent you over and over. You were a mirror, a warning, a hope. The people who lived under emperors after you kept comparing them to you always unfavorably, "He is no Frederick," they would say, "This law is not worthy of the Hohenstaufen hand." They missed your stability, your complexity, your refusal to choose between East and West, faith and knowledge, fire and ink. They missed the middle path. You walked alone, the one no one after you could follow. Not safe. Let your breath slow. The candle gutters in the window slit. The wind outside no longer carries news. Or horses. or banners. Just silence. You lie in Palermo, beneath a red porphyry tomb once carved for a Roman emperor. Around you, marble columns. Above you, saints in mosaic. Below, earth, black, cool, eternal. Your empire is gone. The line of Hohenstaufen snapped like a bowstring. Your grandson, Conradin, beheaded in Naples. Your son, Manfred, thrown into a pit. The lands of Sicily auctioned off like livestock to French princes. The German crown passed from hand to hand like a cursed coin. What was once yours is now everyone's problem, but not yours. You are still at peace. Or something like it. Yet still, the world remembers. They remember your laws. Some are still cited. Legal scholars still debate your constitutions of Melfi, your reforms on medicine, on public morality, on the control of markets. Historians admire your creation of a secular, literate, rational government before anyone thought it possible. They remember your books. Your falconry manual remains one of the most detailed avian studies of the pre-modern world. Your court's translations of Aristotle, Galen, and Ibn Sina influenced scholars from Paris to Baghdad. They remember your wars. Not always kindly. You were brutal when pushed. You crushed cities that defied you. You buried Milan. Twice. You tore through Lombardy like judgment in armor. And yet, you always tried to leave something behind. A charter. A school. A thought. They remember your enemies. The popes who excommunicated you. Who labeled you the Antichrist? Who said your court was a nest of heretics? Your soul blackened. Your tongue forked? And yet, they could never silence you. Because even when you were silenced, your questions weren't, who rules the ruler? Can the sacred be reasoned? Does empire mean obedience or balance? No one ever answered them. But everyone remembered that you asked, and still they ask. Every time a judge must choose law over faith, every time a scholar must speak truth to the powerful, every time a ruler must choose not between sword and scepter, but between truth and comfort, they ask, what would Frederick do? And the answer isn't easy. Because you were not easy. You were a paradox. A man of contradictions. A Christian emperor who built mosques. A Sicilian monarch who spoke Arabic. A German king who governed from the Mediterranean. A crowned sovereign who was excommunicated 3 times and still believed the empire was sacred. You were not perfect, but you were possible. And that, perhaps, is the hardest thing to forgive. So sleep now. Emperor, let the empire fade. Let the roads you built crumble beneath the hooves of time. Let the parchments yellow. The laws be rewritten. The cities renamed. Let it all go. Because what matters is this. You showed the world a different way. You ruled with eyes wide open. You lived as if knowledge itself was a kind of faith. You died, but your echo did not. Sleep now. Let the world turn without you for a while. It will not forget. And somewhere, beneath stars that never burn out, your falcons still fly?